Season 1, Episode 42 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. If only there were an arbitrary number associated with me to prove my worth.
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I'm your host and character who managed to suddenly learn world-destroying powers while sleeping, Adam.
I'm your player who asks if we leveled up after every battle, Sarah.
And I'm your player who kills random NPCs for the EXP, Tom.
Yes, gotta get that XP. Thank you guys for being on the show today. Tom, we had a good session. We're back in session last night after a week off, and it was nice to get some playtime in. How do you think things went, especially against that giant blob you put us against?
Well, I mean, as a note, Alma should probably watch where she sits from now on.
But no, this is ridiculous because I play an old ass lady who was just trying to sit down and rest her weary old bones, and Tom took that opportunity to nearly kill her by slapping her in the head with a blob.
Well, of all the things you could have sat on, you sat on the mysterious stalagmite with holes all over it that is in the center of the room.
It looked comfortable.
She had been traveling a little bit too.
But I mean, it could have gone worse. To be honest, though, it could have gone a lot worse if Alma had not triggered that encounter then. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. All right.
So,
well, I was within one hit point of dying, so going unconscious, and then you managed to also damn near kill Ben yet again. I mean,
my God,
poor Ben. Every damn campaign, like he is on death's door. He was very close to a perma kill off a crit from that blob.
Well, if Alma, because I know that black puddings are scary, especially in melee. They're a very cool monster if you want to really mess with your melee characters, as long as players don't metagame too much. But if Alma, put it this way, props to Alma, if she had not sat there, I could have foreseen a TPK.
Really?
Oh.
Yep.
Wow.
And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good.
Well, thank you to Alma's behind.
Good job, Alma. So, well, hey, it was a great session last night, and honestly, like a really interesting dungeon. Usually, dungeons are pretty straightforward. You go in, you kill stuff, you get XP and loot and all that, and you're done. Yeah, we had marriage counseling. We had an ally on the inside who helped us and healed us when we were getting destroyed by rats. Then Alma manages to sit exactly where she shouldn't sit. I mean, there were some interesting events that happened. So pretty cool little dungeon area that you had there, Tom.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And the thing with Storm King's Thunder is it has its flaws, particularly when you're trying to connect large story beats that are a struggle to connect and make them work because they kind of hand wave them. But when you get into each individual section, there's so much depth and so much to work with that I can kind of put my own stamp on it. But I can put more effort into making my own touch on it to make it unique to the players and the characters that are in the story, and less on trying to focus on the details of every little fine print for a location.
Yeah, especially since we kind of can fill that kind of stuff in with just our RP. Like Sarah, your character Sejan, I've never seen you play such a kind of like selfish money grubbing character before, and I really like anything that comes up. She's like, "I'll take it."
Well, Mina wanted it for her temple, but that was a whole other reason.
That was a whole other thing.
Yes, Sejan wants it because she's got kids to feed. So every little bit matters, right? Like she's living at the edge of poverty with all these kids and a partner who's hobbled. So she's just got to bring home the bacon, and her going home is so infrequent that she has to kind of get as much money together as possible to leave him with.
It's like
And-
Faerun's version of Deadliest Catch. You're going out and just trying to make the year's income in one fell swoop. So
And props
Exactly.
to Steve. Props to Steve, because I don't know if he knew or not that Sejan had like a family that she was getting. Like she wasn't just a money grubbing, like, oh, for selfish reasons. Like this was for a family at home. And the in-character response when you're like, yeah, I have 7 kids and I have a husband at home. Like, what's up? And he like the response of just the shock in character. I couldn't tell if Steve knew or not, or if he was just playing it off very, very well.
Oh, I don't think he knew the story.
Okay.
Well, it was a great session last night. Thanks, Tom, for running that. But let's get into the topic for today. In just about any tabletop role-playing game, there is some form of level up, some way of showing a character has progressed, whether that's with a changing number next to their name or some cool new ability that they didn't possess before. For players, it's a tangible way of feeling like their character is growing. For DMs, it's a way to reward players as well as give an excuse to put them in even more dangerous situations. But it's not without its drawbacks. Leveling up can feel too quick or too slow. Might not even make sense as to why your character suddenly has these new powers. Might make you wonder why the old grandmother you're playing didn't progress her entire life until she met these wandering adventures, based on the true story here. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, the level up. Now, Sarah, when it comes to your character leveling up or showing some kind of progress within a story, what is your ideal? Well, like how would you like your character's progress to feel?
Oh, great question. I want it to feel earned. I want to feel like I really kind of fought for it and then I got it. But that being said, there is probably a cap on that. Like if it's a one shot or like a 4-week campaign, keeping people at level 1 the whole time is probably going to end up in a TPK, because if an ogre spits on them, they're going to die. So I'm a little bit more open to people leveling up quicker when it's just a very short campaign, because also you're probably trying out a new like a new class or something, and you want to like see what's available, and you also don't want to die. But for me, the most rewarding is definitely when it feels earned. Like we fought, we sweated, we almost lost, we went through a grueling gauntlet, and then finally we learned those skills that we need, that we need to continue on. So
well, when it comes to like the game we most often play is D&D 5e. We've tried some others, but that's the one we play the most. And the big thing within 5e is milestone versus XP. Like I know we usually go milestone. Is that what you prefer, or do you like the numbers game?
I like milestones. I do. I personally, I don't get, the pleasure of adding up all the numbers and stuff. It's nice to be able to anticipate, like, oh, we're going to level up probably tonight because, maybe we'll have 2 battles and stuff like that. But I really just enjoy the milestone of it, because then it feels like there's a significant also story beat that happened that helps us into like sort of the next area or the next challenge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Tom, how about you? What's your kind of ideal when it comes to character progression?
So having run
opinions?
both milestone and experience, experience looks good on paper, but it is innately flawed in that it kind of, because you have players looking at that number, it kind of snowballs and especially cripples your ability as a DM to throw different challenges at them, because everything you give them, whether it's they're trying to cheese a long rest in a dungeon, I throw some things at them, or like monsters are supposed to be kind of a consequence for things, but when it's rewarding them every step of the way, you can easily snowball out of control with experience. And me being my one group that I am running experience in, just being, not more on the conservative side of extra experience for being for like odd off the wall encounters, they leveled up probably 4 levels higher than they should have been.
Huh.
Just from like over the night random encounters that gave a couple XP here and there. And it just snowballs, because the more, then you try to keep it balanced by giving bigger creatures at them, which gives them more experience. So it really, really snowballs out of control very quickly. And it also gives a bad incentive, because it teaches players that, because with D&D 5e, experience is strictly tied to challenge rating of a monster. If you kill that monster or defeat the monster in some way, whether it's through socializing interaction or combat, then you get that number. So unless players are very self-driven and interested in roleplay, there's no real reward for doing anything else. And it kind of like everybody complains about
for solving puzzles, or even like
there's no, at least there's no standard for it. Like there's no puzzle or social encounter experience breakdown that I've seen. And I'm sure there's stuff online that you can find that might help much more, some sort of homebrew stuff. But with the standard breakdown of numbers, it's only kill monster, get numbers, you level up.
Yeah, or in general, defeat monster, whether
defeat
that's,
monster, yes,
through combat or otherwise. But yeah,
so like overcoming a puzzle or anything, it's just ignored.
What about you, Adam? What's your preference?
I'm definitely with you guys in terms of milestone, because I don't like the numbers game. I like it being tied to story as much as possible. I think my favorite so far has been in Steve's campaign Avernus, where, especially for that level 3, which is such a huge change for so many characters in this system, that he really tried to tie in story as to why suddenly you're going to gain these powers. And he did that a couple sessions in advance. I thought that was a really great way to do it, because for me, it's not even so much numbers versus, milestone. For me, it's making sense. Like, does it make sense that suddenly I can do this? And I think that's where D&D specifically falls flat a lot, because of all the different abilities you get each level, especially in those early levels. It just doesn't make any sense why you can suddenly do this, especially when most times that level up takes place after a long rest. So, yesterday I couldn't do something, now today I suddenly can, and there's no story reason for it. And that's probably what bugs me the most about it. But if I had to choose between the two, definitely milestone is the way that I would go. It just makes a bit more sense in my mind, and is a lot more fun. Like I can't stand when it's like, I'm 100 experience points away from leveling up. Like, come on, no, that's not my thing.
You just have to kick over a kobold, and then you're like, I got all this new information in my head.
I've had players be like, I need X experience. I'm going to go out and sit in the field and see if something attacks me so I can get another level up.
Yeah. And I feel like the numbers make it more video game-esque, which, it can, there's nothing wrong with that. People can people enjoy that. For me though, I would play a video game if I wanted to see,
exactly
how much more I got to do, right? It's through the role play and the fighting therein that I really want to level up. So.
I play video games all the time. I get that from video games. I sacrifice, not sacrifice, but I spend my limited amount of social time to do tabletop role playing, because of what that brings to the table that's different than a video game. And what's different are the interactions, the stories, this kind of tie that you have with your character. And the numbers game just kind of blanks that out.
To play Bone Devil's Advocate here, I've had I've talked with this with different people, and one of the counter arguments I've come across, at least from a player perspective, against milestone, is that there's a fear or a concern that if it's milestone, then they won't get a level up until they do the right thing. Like there's an expected hurdle they have to overcome or direction they have to go that is locked until they do that. So like if I don't go down the right hallway, I don't get a level up. If I don't find the right clue, I don't get a level up. So then there's that frustration.
Every other place on the map except the one I'm supposed to go to.
Yep.
I don't get level.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have to say Milestone I love, but it's not without its flaws, and that would be one of the things you need a flexible DM who's going to adapt to the situation and be able to trust them. I feel, but even the sort of the nebulousness of when that milestone is going to happen is something I think that we still need to create an answer for it to be content. The numbers might are great because they give you that insight into how much farther, but I see what you're saying. It can be like, oh, I didn't do the right thing. When am I going to be level 3? And then trying to figure it out and read the DM's mind and all that. But
I think it depends a lot on the DM. Like if you have a halfway decent DM, like I'm not so sure milestones should be tied to a specific event. Maybe that's what it's intended to do. But in my mind, milestone was more along the lines of when the DM thought, yeah, makes sense now. like that. That's kind of that was my interpretation of milestone, was when it made sense, not necessarily like you have to reach this point in the story before I move you forward, because and that might be different when it comes to the written modules, just because there's so much already written out for a specific level. If it's more homebrewy, you can adapt a lot of your battles and stuff to whatever level they're at. So I always viewed milestone as yep, this makes sense right here. Yeah. You guys have done well. You've done, a lot of different things. I think it's deserved now. But if you're, say, in an informal group that you haven't met them before, or like a bunch of new players around, maybe it's smarter to start with XP, because that puts it kind of back in the players' hands a little bit more, because they see what's happening. They know what they killed. They know what that's worth. And therefore you can't really play around when it comes to numbers. So I think that's kind of my feelings on that.
It's additional overhead for the DM with the experience points.
Is that kind of where you think, Tom?
Yeah.
What was that?
Why do we even play together? Jeez.
I know. Whatever. No. All right. So
I like milestone, and again, I've had back on Storm King's Thunder. One of the flaws that I did notice is it is milestone, but they kind of used milestone as the excuse to power level characters to, you must be at least this level to ride the ride. So we're going to level you up for walking to a town, level you up for walking through a cave, level you up for coming back to the town. Okay, now you can play.
How do you guys feel about getting experience, whether it's points or just in general, towards a milestone for avoiding combat?
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
I prefer it.
Like, me too. Like, if you are crafty enough to avoid it, like what was it? Season 2 where we just kind of one of the groups just kind of crept through invisible. We used Rod's sort of like pass without trace. Yeah, to get by like a whole bunch of encounters. And I don't think that should go unrewarded.
No, I think it deserves just as much as if you stayed and fought, to be honest. I mean, and same thing goes with those social encounters and puzzles and stuff like that. I mean, like, if there isn't something listed as a reward for that, you need to make it up, because those things in my mind are just as, if not more important than, I see a bad guy, let me kill him.
Yeah.
Well, what I like to do is I like to if it's a combat encounter that's solved amicably or through fighting, I reward either way, because I think that's cool if you can, because it's easy to go up and swing something at them. It's hard to come up with a clever way to circumnavigate that.
Yeah,
So I
like what
reward.
Matt did with the ogres. That
Yes.
was brilliant, and that deserves just as much XP or milestone progress as if we had defeated them in combat.
And
Yeah.
then the social interactions where it's not, a binary combat, did you defeat them somehow, or did you surpass this somehow, and it's more ambiguous. That's when I like to incorporate material rewards, for lack of a way of putting it. So like money or an item or something like that that kind of brings into a more tangibility to the world. Like you are able to like with Gwerk, the goblin that I had, like when you guys came out wrecked from that, and it's like you survived, but it was rough. She actually felt sorry for you and realized that the reward wasn't enough and decided to give more. So there's kind of that interaction, and the fact that you did try to meet her halfway, and you did try to you cared about what she cared about. You didn't ask questions about going to face the blob. You're just like, okay, you need help, we'll help you. And that kind of built a rapport with the character that led to more.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, let's dive into this topic a little deeper here and get into some questions for the week. Our first post here comes from Reddit user Gothvan, who asks, leveling pace. Hey, new 5e DM here. I'm wondering, what is the leveling pace you'd expect for a group of 5 level 1s? I use the experience system, and I expect to have a few fights every session. For example, they should be level 2 after the first one if I add the XP of the possible encounters. So yeah, for example, let's say we play every week for 4 hours. How much time or sessions would it take to reach level 10 in your opinion? I ask because I've heard many times that the game is not that fun after level 10 or 11. So while I do not want to artificially slow down their development, I do want to have an idea of how long the good part of the game will last. I know it's difficult to be precise, but a rough estimate will do. Thanks. All right, Tom. So what do you think of Gothvan's question here? How long do you think it'll take to level up to 10 in their campaign?
So I have some words in this. So first off, your comment on not fun after level 10 or 11. So that's a perspective thing. So for players, it's amazingly fun because you're basically a demigod.
Yeah.
And I would grind that down to closer to like level 6 or level 7, because that's when a lot of the more game breaking spells come into play. Granted, there are more at higher levels, but that's where it kind of starts. So to answer your question directly, strictly, it would be based off of the numbers that you can get on like if you look at the player's handbook, page 15, it gives a breakdown of the experience per level. And you look at the Dungeon Master's Guide, where it breaks down, allotted experience per day, recommended per player, and so on and so forth. It would be 22 to 20 in-game days to reach from level 1 to level 10. That's assuming that you're basically giving exactly the amount of experience that is recommended for each adventuring day between long rests. And that would be that many adventuring days. So assuming that it was each adventuring day, in quotes, was a session, you have your encounters within that period, and you would level up at the end of the session. Or not the level up, because there sometimes takes multiple days, but it would take that many sessions of weekly sessions to level that far up. I can tell you from experience, that's not how it works. I have a group of level 4s, and like I said, I've they've gone leaps and bounds of experience more than I intended, because I was giving little bits of extra experience here and there. I've been running pretty much weekly sessions for a year, and they're only 3/4 of the way through level 7, and that's with a party of 4. If you have a party of 5, you need to count for having even more combat, more monsters, more experience to fill in that multiplier. So you're going to be, it's going to take longer.
Gentlemen, we are seeing a nerd in his natural habitat.
So yeah,
I love you, Tom.
I try. So what I would recommend,
all
if
the
you really
players
want to
are
go
really,
this
really
way,
smart. I love seeing you guys in your element. Go for it.
So if you really want to go this route, again, I would recommend, as we've said before, I would recommend Milestone. But if you really want to go this route, calculate the numbers up. So you would need for like total experience points for 5 players to reach level 10. You would need 320,000 experience points. So take that number. It's a back burner number for now, but that's your total. And you can basically spend from that as the characters level up. But then what you do is you look at between each level, how many experience points it would take. So for all of your characters, for example, to go from level 4 to level 5, you would need 19,000 experience points. So that's your closer number. You take that and then you break that down into challenge rating of monsters. So, okay, I want each encounter, I want to have, these monsters, and you can basically buy monsters from that based off their CR from that mass of experience points. And then it breaks down within that gives you at least a starting point where you could have, based off of challenge rating and how tough you want it to be and the makeup of your party, there's a lot of variables that you need to take into account. So that way you're not, killing them with something that's, because a Tarrasque is, I think, like 100,000. So you might want to go on the safer side, more weaker monsters and less bigger monsters. But that's the thing you can test out to see how it fits your party. But I would figure out that total between levels and then use that to buy monsters for encounters and then build your encounters from there. And that'll help you break it down. But strictly, if you're going to grind them,
Tom is reading from his dissertation for college. That
I have only 3 pages of notes. It's fine.
You wrote 3 pages of notes. Oh my goodness! It's clear you did your research.
So 22 to 26 like game days. When we're actually breaking that down into actual play, you're probably looking at double that, right?
Yep. At least.
Yeah, so at least. So time wise, you're looking at the about the 10-month range, I'm guessing.
That's assuming there's no snafus. Like you're not taking longer in a dungeon. You're not taking, boss fights might take longer for one encounter. This is assuming just based off the numbers. So I would even say a little over a year if you're playing consistently every week. And you've already calculated out that each encounter, and sometimes they might skip encounters. You might have players not go down that hallway and they don't come across the monsters that have that critical experience that you need to get them to the next level.
Well, there you have it, Gothman. The complete breakdown of XP totals to get from 1 to level 10. Hopefully that helps. Let us know if it did. Great job, Tom, putting that all together.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to compensate you for having to do all that math, but
I know.
it's really,
Simply
well
addition and
done.
That's a
multiplication.
very thorough answer, though. So I applaud you.
Exactly.
News here.
And the sound of Ralphie the News Goblin can mean only one thing. It is time for Potomac RPG News.
Ralphie, stop blocking me.
So, some controversy to start things off. Apparently, Netflix has started a bit of an online feud by stating that Geralt of Rivia would be a cleric instead of a rogue in D&D. So, Joe Craig over at thegamer.com has an article talking all about it. I mean, this is just ridiculous, right? There is no way Geralt would be a cleric. There's just no way. Now, Sarah, I know you're a lover of clerics. What say you on this debate? And furthermore, what class do you think Geralt really fits into best?
So clerics, as a fundamental element, have to believe in a god. And from what I understand, Geralt is an atheist. So he's not a cleric. In fact, and I don't even know why someone said rogue, because to me that's also confusing. He's a ranger. He hunts, he tracks, and he slays monsters. And, so I think he's 100% a ranger. So
Ranger it is. All right, Tom, weigh in on this. What do you think?
I agree with you. Not a cleric for sure. Like you said, the deity, but he could be a he's definitely ranger, but I would say ranger, fighter, maybe a paladin dip multi-class. Because paladins, he does have a code that he follows. Another arguable paladin in pop culture might be Mando from The Mandalorian. They have a code that they follow, and convictions that lead them to where they're going.
But do they get special powers from following that code? I think that's really where
True. There are special powers that tie to that. But who's to say that the crazy luck or the fact that they're able to endure things is not due to their convictions, their willpower, if you will. I'm not going to start going on how Green Lantern is a paladin as well. But anyway, wrong rabbit hole. But no, I agree with you. The ranger first and foremost. Then there are elements that, fighter and maybe even paladin, depending on how you play them. Another one that's an easy one is I think it's the critical role blood hunter. That's essentially it's a fighting based. They make potions that they drink to empower their abilities. They have vague magic that they can use that lets
That's
them,
actually really good, Tom.
That is so.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, better than ranger even, or ranger, maybe the ranger blood hunter, but yeah.
I would have gone like fighter that took magic initiate as a feat, variant human or something. Yeah, but I'm actually, the blood hunter really makes a lot of sense. So I think I'm going to be swayed to your side on that as well, Tom. Like it sounds like blood hunter all the way, right, Sarah?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I changed my mind, and I don't know what Netflix is doing. They're just starting a controversy.
They're just starting it up so they can, get some hits on it and generate some talk about the. I mean, the show's awesome. I don't know if you guys have seen the show.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Just amazing. Just wonderful to see that, and maybe they're just trying to get some fur over the show. But Netflix, you have your answer. Blood Hunter it is. So let's get into our next story here. Now, this I had to add just for Tom. It's an article from Christian Hoffer over at comicbook.com that discusses a new third-party supplement that details 32 different kinds of gelatinous cubes. Now, I know you have a soft spot in your heart for cubes, oozes, puddings, blobs. So any interest in this, Tom?
Yes, I'm looking at the price right now up on the Dungeon Masters Guild. I have, hashtag not an ad, but I love Dungeon Masters Guild. I have bought a few because people put a lot of work into, taking modules or existing things and running through them. And then they share that with everyone. And I really appreciate that. It's a community. And they're not that expensive, for $5 you can basically save yourself hours of prep time for something or come across a cool monster. I actually have bought several samples like this. There's one based off of mimics that I've used when I played mimics with you guys. A lot of the different mimics types were based off of that. I got one on beholders that breaks down different beholder types. And a lot of it is simply just taking creatures from the long history of D&D from older editions and breaking them down into 5th edition rules and mechanics so that you can apply them.
Adam, I think you need to have a trivia session one time with Tom and Matt on and just have it do oozes and puddings and blobs and stuff. And I would love to see who comes out ahead.
Well, I've played. Yeah, I'm in Tom's Monday games, and of course, what we're doing now. I think every game I've played of yours, Tom, has had some kind of cube, blob, pudding, or ooze involved in it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's almost like oozes are the goblins for most people. Like that's what it feels. What is it about oozes that excites you so much, Tom?
Well, yeah, let's hear
they're that first foray into creatures that are not humanoid greenskin goblinoids. So you have, because a lot of your early adventures are, your goblins, and then you throw in the bugbears, and then you throw in orcs. I don't know why in Faerun Sword Coast lore, there's so many times that orcs have looted things. I feel bad for the orcs now because they're getting a bad rap. They need better PR. Because literally every dungeon you come across is, oh, this used to be a sparkling paradise, but then the orcs attacked. It's like this is not the Fire Nation. Come on. But then when you start branching out beyond that, the first one you come across in terms of CR, at least for me, is oozes, slimes, and they also have unique abilities that tend to bypass a lot of the characters' I hit hard, I win abilities, and a lot of immunities. Because like you can, if you have a like werewolves and a lot of your rare creatures, they have that immunity to slashing damage from non-magical weapons. And if the characters don't have magical weapons, they can't win. If the characters have magical weapons, they win easily. So there's that split. But with a lot of your oozes and stuff, they kind of bypass that. Like the gelatinous cubes, you can walk into them. They're invisible to most players. They're an excellent living trap. A lot of your puddings, they split when you hit them with slashing damage. There's still a way they can still defeat them if they get smart about it. Like, oh, we're gonna use bludgeoning damage, or we're going to kite them and go back. They can learn from that. But they're kind of they're also a good trap monster. Like with puddings, they're meant to be hit, and if you hit them, you lose. They only have an armor class of 7, and they damage you if you hit them. So they're an excellent kind of reversal. They're a reverse card of monsters. Once you have everybody's kind of lulled into complacency of, oh, I kill the goblins, I kill the orcs, I kill the gnomes. It's now it's so this is going to be a challenge.
Why gnomes? Why are you killing gnomes? Gnomes are nice.
You should know.
I know. I do. Well, Sarah, how about you? Like, do you like blobs and puddings and cubes?
I don't.
I don't.
I don't pick up the monster manual and go, oh my God, I love this pudding. But I will say they are refreshing to fight for the very reasons that Tom just named, which are, the heavy hitters aren't usually as, they don't usually have as much impact. They're almost impotent against a lot of these. And so it's nice to see the magic users really get to kind of shine. And one of our problems was we don't really have a blasty magic user in our group.
I loved when he's like, when you got I loved you got the magic guy was passed around, and it's like, hey, this will give you a bonus to your attack spells. And it's like, well, I don't use any attack spells. Oh, here you go. Well, I don't use any attack spells. Oh, here you go. Well, I don't use any attack spells either.
Yeah, not one damn character that we have in our current campaign has an attack spell. It's all saving throws. So when Nick's character gave us a +1 to spell attacks, we're like, might be worth something. Who knows? I don't know. So, well, hey, if you are interested in cubes and oozes and puddings like Tom is, you can check it out. It's over on DM's Guild, and I think it's like $10. But check it out if you're interested. But for us, we're going to take a step out for a moment. But stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. When we were first getting this podcast together, we knew we needed some good music. And we looked into a lot of options that are out there, but we settled on Soundstripe. At soundstripe.com, they have such a wide variety of high-quality music to choose from. Every song that you hear on this podcast is from Soundstripe, and we couldn't be happier with what they have to offer. And it's not just music. They have a ton of sound effects and video stock footage as well. So if you're making a podcast or videos on YouTube or have some creative project you're working on, check out Soundstripe. They're worth a look. And right now you can use the promo code Potomac RPG, all one word, and get 10% off. That's Potomac RPG, all one word, to get 10% off your purchase. Elevate your work with the finest stock media all in one place at soundstripe.com. And with that, let's get back to the show. How about another question? This post comes from Reddit user the Jinja Ninja 11, who asks, "Low magic campaign. How can I help my players feel progression without lots of magic items? I'm starting a homebrew campaign soon that I'm super excited about. The main government system has started consolidating all the magic items to prevent a disaster similar to one in the past. So magic items are going to be rare goodies. I want gear upgrades to feel incredibly rewarding and earned instead of just expecting to be decked out ASAP. My concern is I have a pair of players who are very Diablo loot grind minded. How can I keep them feeling like their characters are progressing without the constant stream of magic gear? I'm interested in this in the Stronghold and Followers rules Matt Colville has out, but I'd love some other ideas if anyone has experience with lower magic settings. The setting uses Norse, Greek, and Egyptian pantheon, so I could use boons as well, but that gets back toward unbalancing the characters and encounters. Any advice is appreciated. So it seems they have a more combat focused game here, Tom, with the Diablo style mindset. How would you go about showing character progression without handing out a bunch of magic weapons?
That's a tough one because I do like giving up magic items because I'm the cool uncle DM kind of thing, which much to my own detriment.
You are too.
Don't tell
it's
your
true.
parents.
Yeah. So for me, and this is something that I've learned is a lot of the staple in a lot of your D&D modules. These rare magic items, the reason they're rare is yes, they don't make them anymore. They're not, either the government's taking them or they just have fallen into history. So the only place you're going to find magic items are at the end of a dungeon. Like, you have to, the reason that that this item is still here is because no one else has been able to get to it. And that kind of reward at the end of the dungeon, it almost is a Zelda-esque thing. Like you go to the dungeon, you get the cool item in the dungeon. That's one way to do it. And then basically they have to search out these items. And there actually are, I think, some variant rules in Xanathar's Guide would talk about like hunting down magic items. But you could like try to look up lore, look up histories and try to find something. And then it's a quest in itself. One thing that I've done in my game that I'm still not sure if it's broken or not is I took a magic item for one of the characters that they're following a deity, but they're not a cleric. They're actually a zealot barbarian. So I took a magic item called the shard of the ice ruin. It's a very rare item, and as they have been playing along in their character and interacting with this deity, that's a frost giant deity, I've incorporated elements of that magic item into their racial like that. It's almost like a feat. So like they get fire resistance after like they reach a certain level and they've done things that have pleased the god. But one of the things that I've played into it is it actually replaces some of their racial traits. So they had a shifter, it's like a werewolf-esque race, and I've replaced like their bite attack with the fire resistance. And I'm trying to keep it more of I'm replacing things that they have with things that help shape their character in different ways. So that they're not really getting more powerful, they're becoming different. They're evolving.
That's interesting. Well, Sarah, what do you think? Like, I think you're probably going to follow or fall in the same kind of categories. Like, I don't much care about magic items. Rather, I'm more concerned about story. So, what do you feel when it comes to showing progress without dumping magic items everywhere?
I think you can. I think there's a way to do it. To be fair, I don't know that this is actually going to be that you're going to find something completely satisfying for this pair of players because it's not what they want. It's like if I wanted romance in my game and nobody gave me romance, I'm going to be a little unsatisfied. So you just keep that in mind. But maybe you could reward them almost like in reputation. So like, if a town was not exactly welcoming of them after like their names start to get out or like just like have like some twins come up and like lean on you know what I'm saying, like just like fan over them. That might be a way to sort of celebrate the fact that they are progressing forward without the magic. I think you can also kind of like meter it. Like maybe there's a way to put together a magic item. Like they have to collect certain things along the way, and then they can go to someone who can make it all come together as one magic item. So they're still getting that progress of like loot.
The Voltron of
well,
magic
yeah,
items.
it's like breaking it up, right? You get, if you
When our
break the
powers
Oreo into 4
combine.
pieces, you still get 4 pieces.
The
that
four
make it
crystals
feel
of
like
the
there's more.
elements.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just trying to sort of think of a way to give them what they want when it's not really exactly what they want, and so maybe those types of rewards. I will say though that in Steve's game in Avertus, we've had very, very limited drops, but that's because and we've enjoyed it, but at least for the most part, I don't know, I'm not pulling everyone, I think they are though.
Yeah.
Is that that's been super rewarding because of the role play that's involved. Now if these players aren't into the role play, then yeah, you're gonna probably want to pacify them in another way. So those are just the two ideas.
I really
Reputation
like
and
that
breaking it up.
reputation idea of like, you got like fans flocking to them when they enter a town and stuff. That's a very cool like social progress measurement there, which I think is pretty awesome. In my mind, when I really grabbed me whenever they were talking about like the Norse, Greek, and Egyptian pantheon. And the use of boons. I like that idea. And a way to make that work without it kind of unbalancing things is maybe make it temporary. So you get this boon from a god, but it's not going to last the entire campaign. It's a defined number of uses, and then it goes away. So by making things temporary, you don't have to drop a magic item. They still get a boost where they're like, oh, look at this cool thing that I got. But then that cool thing goes away after they've used it, or a certain period of time. They have a day to use it before it goes away. Might be a way to sate that desire for magic items without unbalancing your entire campaign. But good ideas all around, guys. I think that definitely gives the Ninja 11 some ideas to work with. Definitely let us know how that goes, and I'd love to hear more about this campaign, this homebrew campaign you're running. It sounds really cool. So good luck out there. But we've been talking about leveling up characters a lot, and
sorry, Adam, but this isn't what I had in mind when we were going to talk about character progression. I think it's time for a hostile takeover. Taking over! Welcome to the Hostile Takeover, where we wrest control of the show away from Adam and talk about the things we really want to talk about. That's right, Tom and I are staging a mutiny. Tom may not even be aware of this at this moment. We're taking the podcast over so you, Adam, can be in the guest chair for once. And we have some questions, and we really, really need some answers.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal.
First off, when you said character progression would be today's topic, the writer in me got super jubilant and thought we would be talking about character development and the changes a character goes through during their RP journey. Instead, you have Tom sharing numbers like he's reading the Matrix.
1-0-1-1-1-0-1-1-1-0.
That's very true. I'm sorry. please untie me.
No, not yet. So, I would like to take a moment and ask you, Adam, about character progression internally. What does that look like to you, and what does it mean?
Well, I mean, I personally like a lot of the PBTA kind of models of progression, where it's through failure that you're getting better. Specifically, I really enjoy City of Mist and kind of how they tackle player progression, because it's incremental. It takes a good bit of time to get it, depending on the play style. And it feels natural. Like it feels like what you've done in game had an impact on what specifically you're leveling up. And there's kind of like rationale behind that. It's easier to talk about like what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like, suddenly having a power like it, for me, the difference between level quote unquote level 1 and late stage shouldn't be about a bunch of different powers, but rather small steps that, like, yeah, you're better, but it makes sense as to why you're better at this particular thing. If that, I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's kind of what it looks like to me. It has to make sense to what the character's been doing this whole time as to why suddenly they're able to do this new thing. What about you, Tom? How do you feel about that?
Hey,
Oh,
that's
I'm
my
sorry.
question.
Hostile takeover. My fault.
Tom, what about you?
I'm very uncomfortable with the energy you brought to the studio today. For me, so as a lot of what you've seen in the podcast so far is my DM mode. Like, I'm very much numbers, mechanics, and getting things organized and rules for as a DM. As a player, I'm quite the opposite. I don't even care about the spells and it is fun in combat to do a cool spell. Yeah. But the main thing for me is more of the character's growth as a person. Like, whether I'm having fun with the character or not, most of the time solely depends on if I can understand how that character cares about the world around them. Do they have a goal? Why are they on this adventure? And I did feel a little bit like last night with DM as a DM, like, kind of shuffling like the plot forward because it needed to go forward. And that aspect of, why would my character not just go home? Why would my character want to go in this dangerous dungeon and do this thing? What is their personal investment? And when I can see that progression from, level 1 to whatever, that's what I find the most engaging. They've learned from the other players, especially the other player characters, I should say. They've developed connections. They've developed new understanding about themselves and about those around them. That's what's important to me.
Well, I have something else. Sarah.
You can ask a question.
No. In terms of the answer, because
okay.
What Tom was saying kind of resonated another thought, and you know how we would come up with character knives and things that are going on in that character's background that are unresolved right now. That's a big kicker for me. If I can find, if there's a point in the story where certain things start getting resolved that are important to the character's backstory or current situation that they're in, that those character knives that we set up, that's huge. And that's one thing that I felt bad about in the adventure that I ran, since it was kind of shorter, didn't have a lot of time to get into like character backstories and resolving those things. But that's something that we were able to do a lot in Steve's campaign and Anthony's campaign, where you start knocking down some of these character knives. I mean, that feels really good. That's the actual character progression in my mind, more than levels, more than abilities, is the resolution of those backstory items.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, usually when in storytelling, there are 3 types of death that a character is usually trying to avoid, and it's career death, and that's usually like, the cop who's trying to redeem their their reputation, or stuff like that. There's psychological death, which is like either like they didn't get, if they don't get the girl or the guy, their life will forever be empty. Or if they don't rescue their daughter, then their life of course will be forever changed with that guilt and stuff. So that would be an example of psychological death. And then of course there's like physical death, and in some niche areas there's spiritual death. And when we're talking about our characters progressing and stuff, I think what also keeps them motivated to maybe go to that next area and stuff like that is recognizing what the cost is if they don't, and if you can keep them driven because of the fear of a death or trying to avoid one of those deaths. I think what you're going to see is that character will eventually kind of take off and start to change as different things sort of start impacting them and threatening them and making them stronger throughout. And along the way, they level up. For me, the leveling up isn't the be all end all. It's it's sort of the furnace that you're in while you role play. So but that's my 2
That's really
cents.
interesting.
Uh,
I had never heard that about, the different kinds of death and what a motivator that could be.
yeah, I find it's a cool thing to draw on. But let's talk about that. So, Adam, who is your favorite character in a fantasy or sci-fi novel, and why?
Oh, that's so tough, though. I mean, there's so many.
Who's the first one that comes to mind? Then we'll make it
Like
easy.
5 different ones, like right out the gate, and partially because I just reread Dune, because
Oh
the movie's
yeah.
coming out, the TTRPG's coming out, and I know Paul would normally be considered like a favorite character. I think he was kind of a dick personally, but I get it. I mean, I get it. I kind of liked Cheney, who was like his girlfriend slash concubine
Concubine, yeah.
later on in the story. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read the book. But then there's going way back from Wizard of Earthsea. What was his name? Ged, was it? I think was
I
his
don't know that
original
one.
name was Ged, and then he got his true name or whatever. And then sci-fi Red Rising series I read a little while back. So you got Darrow and Cassius and all these and the Howlers with Severo. I mean, there's so many cool ones out there. I literally cannot pick a favorite, and I will relent to one of you guys to put a definitive stamp on a favorite sci-fi or fantasy.
Well, let me just put an amendment on that, and then Tom, I'm going to ask you the next question. But Adam, let's talk about Paul Atreides. Was he the same character when he started? As was he the same character at the end as when he started?
No, I mean there was definitely some progression there. I mean, he definitely was a little less confident and naive and stuff at the beginning than at the end. It's just like I hope that who's playing him in the movie? Is it Timothy Chalamet or something?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Chalamet.
I hope he can pull it off and make him a bit more likable. Because for me, Paul wasn't that likable. I mean, I like Jessica better than Paul personally. Like at least there seemed to be some real internal struggles that she was going through. But I'll give credit where credit is due. Paul did change over the book. There was a pretty massive progression or development in his character.
Yeah, yeah. Tom, what about you? What is your favorite sci-fi or fantasy character, and why?
So I was surprised you mentioned the Dune. I didn't realize you were that excited about the Dune series. Because I'm also a major Dune fan. That's one of my favorite series. Having read like the Legends and then all the way through Dune, Chapter House Dune, and then the sequels that Kevin J. Anderson and Brian Herbert made after the fact. The thing with Paul is, you're right. He's not a likable character, and I think one of the traits with that is his humanity is always in question. Like his progression as you go through is he becomes less and less relatable as a person because of this great power and great responsibility that he's holding on himself, because he's trying to become a god essentially. So you got Emperor of Dune. But the character for me is actually Duncan Idaho.
Nice, yeah.
He in Dune
with the Balisette. Or no, that was Halleck Gurney.
Yeah, and
Duncan Idaho was the fighter dude, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, and Duncan is actually he's actually kind of like a tertiary character in most of the books. He's brought in, but I believe he's actually in every single book in some way or another, except for the Legends, obviously, before he was even born. But he exists in every book. And Duncan, because of that, has been kind of a fixture, this kind of behind the scenes fixture that you when you see him, you see the progression, because you're essentially showing a character who has evolved and progressed and developed over thousands of years, but they're still considered a human, like different from like other fantasy where it's like, oh, an elf or a dwarf who's lived hundreds of years, that's just their lifespan, and they progress in relation to that. this is a human mentality, but because they are being brought into different eras of the books as time frame goes on, not to spoil anything, but their humanity remains intact, whereas Paul's is kind of lost. Their humanity remains intact, and it's interesting seeing their perspective as time goes on. And that's when I finished the sequels at the end of the kind of like supposedly wrapped up the entire Dune saga from start to finish. Duncan remains my favorite character just because of how he to kind of put a little note in it. To me, it reminds me a little bit of Hawkeye in the MCU. Like he's just like, why am I here? But I have to do this. So okay, we'll do it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy there. How about your guys' personal characters? Which character journey of the characters you've created and played was your favorite? Adam?
Oh, that's really tough. I mean, I haven't had all that many. Yeah, obviously it's going to be between in terms of character journey. It's got to be Finbin still. Yeah, I'm liking Tormund more and more in terms of a favorite character, but the actual journey that a character took, there were just too many progression points about this little halfling barbarian who, basically was feral when he first came into the party, to these building relationships with multiple different party members. It just doesn't get better than Finbin in my mind for a favorite character journey.
So he started out feral, and how would you say he ended? Both, let's say, besides feral, also psychologically.
Yeah, I mean, psychologically, like there was definitely this kind of sense of family because he had lost his entire family, like his entire village had been destroyed. So this sense of belonging that came up, and that I think was a big key, that it wasn't so much surviving anymore, but thriving. And so I think he ended, like, he's still plenty rough around the edges, but a sense of community, I think, would be kind of where his head was.
Oh, I love Finbin. Thank you. What about you, Tom? Who's your favorite character that you've created, and why? And how were they at the beginning and the end of when you stopped playing?
Well, I'm kind of going with the same campaign, mostly because it's one of the longer running campaigns that we had. Was Brooke Nalo in our first campaign with Anthony. Mostly because, like Adam said, there was a lot of connections with people. Because we had that stint where we were able to, on Slack, and it was like over the holidays and stuff, where we were able to basically just have one-on-one role play with other characters. So like I had role play interactions through Slack, text through with Finbin. Brooke had it with Mina. Brooke had it with our fighter character. Tying up Mal to the table and pinning him there so he wouldn't. Yeah, all these interactions that they help build the character and kind of define them, almost like creating a novel. Like it was literally it wasn't D&D anymore. It was basically a collaborative storytelling. And like I said, having a character that has goals and understands themselves and identifies with the world around them, being the most meaningful. That's why Brooke is kind of the bar that I put every other character, for better or for worse, because that's the character that I was able to get into. I was able to embody the most because I understood them the most, just because I had the most time playing her with other people, like that back and forth dialogue.
Well, what about you, Sarah?
I'm really, really digging Rushka right now, but she's still just like in her infancy as far as progression goes. So I would go back to the same campaign, and I would say Mina. And I know that she wasn't everybody's favorite character, but she was driven, and she changed so much because she was like very like a little bit demure and innocent at the beginning, and kind of figuring her way out and curious, and
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 then
she
going
had
to
this,
sex temples and having statues
well, and then she
built
had
up.
an agenda to be
I
like
mean-
the best follower of Lathander ever, to the point that she became power obsessed and influence obsessed, and she totally transformed. She's a different person by the end, and I really just loved that whole journey of discovery and stuff.
It really was a
So-
magical campaign, wasn't it? That was just like all the different interactions the characters had. A lot of memories in that campaign.
And a lot of it too, I think, had to do with the fact that our characters had relationships with each other. They had
Mhm.
friendships, they had little rivalries. There was love, there was flirtation, there was fighting, there was Finban being a total punk to Mina for no reason at all.
Yeah,
No
I
reason.
was wondering that when you said I had so many Finban had so many relationships with the party. I'm thinking, well, how many were positive and how many were negative? Like, I feel like there was one positive, like one neutral, and then the rest were negative.
Well,
No.
hey, I am going to step in here and
Oh,
get control
okay.
back
No,
of this podcast. Thank you,
Fine.
Sarah. That was a lot of fun
Staying out of it.
to go through that stuff. But now we're out of time. We have no time for
No.
anything else. So that is going to do it.
Never
for
stop
us
playing. What?
this week.
Yeah.
Never exactly. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@potomacrpg.com. Check out our store for merch at teespring.com/stores/PotomacRPG. If you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/PotomacRPG. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac RPG on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for being on today, Sarah and Tom. Thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew, and of course, all of our listeners out there. So, for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Tom.
Till next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
Never stop grinding.
progressing.
One thing you could always do is when I'm like prattling on about numbers and stuff, you could just insert like a fast forward like sound, like so you have 320,000, and then what you do is you
love
take that
that.
pot of points and